So this webinar is called Keep Calm and Work Remotely. And this is a guide specifically for marketeers. However, it is applicable to anyone. So I thought I'd open it out to my Facebook world. And if anyone wants to join me in this webinar, you are more than welcome. So what are we going to be covering today? Well, I'm going to do a couple of housekeeping rules. Then we're going to do a survey. Going to talk about virtual working, and we're going to look at 8 specific points here and then also give you some examples. And we're going to run a Q&A session. So you'll be able to see my screen, you'll be able to see my presentation. If you have any questions, whether it is through Zoom itself or through Facebook, do let me know and we'll have a look at these at the end. So the first thing that I want us to look at is a survey. And now we have a service that we use called Mentimeter, and all you need to do is go to menti.com and then you use the code 512243. What I'd like you to do is to tell me the first 3 words that come to mind to explain how you feel about remote working. So you can either use the QR code that we have on the screen, or you can just simply go to menti.com and then use that code 512243. And we'll look at those a bit later. So just go and take a look at doing that now. What I have for you on the screen is when I ran this session last week, this is some of the types of comments that we had coming back. And it's really interesting to see that some of these comments that we have are quite negative in their respect, that they're saying annoying, boring, tough, quiet, hard, unusual, flat, endless, unproductive, stressed, longer hours. So we really can see, and it will certainly resonate with a lot of you about how people are feeling about working remotely, especially when you're quite used to being in the office. But even more so, that even people like myself who work remotely all the time, every day, it's actually more to do with the distractions that you have around you, which tend to be children, partners, just stuff really, that maybe wasn't an issue before. So make sure that you go into menti.com, type in the code 512243, because I'd love to see your kind of answers for that. And also I'm going to look to add this in. Bear with me a moment. I'm going to look to add it into the chat, but it's not letting me. So, you know, technology, we'll just move on. Okay. So what are we looking at today? We're looking at virtual working. We are looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I did see that there was a little survey that had been done by Stanford University saying that working from home resulted in a 13% increase in productivity. Now that may have been the case before lockdown or before we had this pandemic. But you know, it may be the case now if you don't have lots of distractions. So the first thing that I want to cover, this is the reason I'm covering this first, is because it's so important, and it's being fit and healthy. It's keeping yourself fit and healthy. So what I want you to do is make the best use of your commuting time. So that time that you would have been spending going to work, use that time to do something that makes you happy. Now, whether that is spending a bit more time with your family, sitting down with a coffee, reading a book, taking the dog out for a longer walk, just use that time effectively to really set you up for the day. And also, if you commuted at the end of the day as well, then use that time as well. And even if that means staying in bed that extra hour, do it. Take regular breaks and stay hydrated. I laugh at some of these points that I have here because I am historically terrible at keeping myself hydrated and looking after myself. So I really need to look at what I'm writing here, but it is important that you stay hydrated. I have my flask here, which has my water. I don't always fill it full because that encourages me to get up off my desk or away from my desk and go and replenish my bottle. But sometimes you just really forget to look after yourself. Also block out some time for your lunchtime. If you work in an office environment and you do go take time to be with your colleagues and go and have lunch in your canteen, or just go and take time to go outside, make sure that you block this out in your calendar, because that also means that your colleagues are able to see when you're not available for meetings. And move away from your computer. That is just incredibly important. Just get outside, breathe in the fresh air if you have it. I mean, you know, with everything that's happening at the moment in lockdown or with this pandemic, you know, we have a lot less traffic, so the air's a bit cleaner. So take advantage of that, because let's hope that in our lifetimes, this doesn't happen again. Reduce meeting times. Several customers of mine have said to me that since now working more remotely, even though they supported it in the past, but with more staff working remotely, there seems to be quite a lot of enthusiasm for people to have more meetings and have meetings for the sake of having meetings. So definitely look to reduce your meeting times. We'll cover that in a moment in terms of how you can time box those. Get dressed. So a recent study had showed that 12% of workers admitted they are usually naked when taking a conference call. Now, if I was sat a little bit back, you could see me a bit more, but my hair's a little bit long and it was covering my straps on my shoulders in a conference call, a video conference call that I was doing earlier. And my client and I were having a laugh because it looked like I was naked. And then I moved my hair and all was fine. So I did hear an example a couple of weeks ago of where a friend of mine was on a conference call and the dog was barking, and so they got up to go and sort the dog out, forgetting, this wasn't my friend by the way, this was their colleague, forgetting that they hadn't put any trousers on. So, you know, get dressed. It also makes you feel like you've got some routine in the day, you've got some normality. Of course, you don't have to get dressed in your work gear necessarily, unless you do lots of conference calls, but you know, get yourself dressed, get yourself ready, because it really gets you in a better frame of mind. And think about your mental health, which is just significantly important. We saw earlier from that cloud that I showed you, that word cloud, the types of words that people are using about how they feel about remote working. And of course there were positive ones, but there were ones which were negative. So you really need to think about your mental health and make sure that you've got boundaries in place so that you've got a good work-life balance, that you're looking after yourself, that you're staying hydrated, and that you're looking after your mind. So whether that's using tools like Headspace, for example, or those kind of mindfulness tools, or whether you just need to take some time out and some time to yourself, or read a book, or just do something that makes you happy or just gives you that space. Okay, so the second one we want to look at is staying sane online. Can be quite tough. So use tools to show when you're available. If you work in a business environment, there are a number of different tools that you can use, Skype for Business, Teams, for etc. They show your availability. Slack's the same as well. They'll say when you're available. They generally tend to sync to your calendar as well. So if you have a meeting in your calendar, they'll say that you're busy, or if you're presenting and sharing your screen like I am, then they'll say do not disturb. But make sure that you use those tools when available, because your colleagues are in the same position as you and they can't see when you're available and when you're working unless you use a system to do that. And check in with each other like you would do if you're in the office, you know, where you just go and chat to each other at the desk, or you go and make yourself a tea or coffee or whatever, and you speak to them by the vending machine. Just make sure that you check in, even if it's a check-in or a catch-up with your line manager. Just ensure that you're just saying, hey, you know, I'm here, how are you? You know, just have a bit of a social chinwag. Create a virtual working space. So this could sometimes be used with systems like Zoom or with Teams, or Skype for Business, even though that's been phased out in favor of Teams. So use, create a space where people can drop in and out of. Now we did this a few weeks ago, and we had fantastic people that joined us, just popped in and said hello, people I hadn't spoken to or even seen, even though it's virtually, for like 20 years. So it was really, really fantastic. But just give yourself a working space where you can pop into and say, hey, you know, how you doing? I just felt like I needed a bit of company. Don't feel like you should be isolated, because there are plenty of tools and ways out there that you can look after yourself. Speak to each other. So that's very much the same as checking in, but also in terms of it can be so easy just to send off loads and loads of emails. Don't do that. What you should do is pick up the phone and talk to each other, or message each other, call on Skype or Teams or whatever service you use, and actually have a video call so that you can see each other, or just have a call even if you just see each other's pictures. So it's really, really important that you do speak to each other, and also because tone of voice can be misrepresented. So if, for example, you send a message and the person picks it up and they're not in the best frame of mind, they may read your email incorrectly in the frame of mind that they're in. Okay, so create and engage in online interest groups. Now, there are a number of groups out there if you're part of a membership body, for example, that they may host, but there may also be ones on Facebook, or there'll be work ones. Some of my clients will use, for example, Yammer to create groups. So there could be groups like, I love my dog, I love my cat, I love my ferret, I love my snake. I might be on my own in that group, but what you can do is go into those groups, and they really enable you to meet and network with colleagues around the globe that maybe you may not have had the opportunity to work with much before, and help you to build relationships. So, you know, post a picture of your dog or your child or whatever the interest group is. They're really good fun as well, because you get lots of positive feedback. Accommodate different styles. So this is more about learning styles. Now, VAC is virtual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And that basically means is that everyone has a different way that they learn and that they process and they take in information. Some people are more visual. So for example, like looking at the screen, like seeing me, don't know why. Some people are more auditory, so they like to hear things. Maybe on a conference call, they're not really watching the screen, but they're taking the information in. I like audiobooks, for example. I don't have time to read books, but I like to listen to them. And then kinesthetic is where you actually engage in something, where you do something. So if you went to a conference, for example, when we can actually all, you know, be in the same room as each other, you'll sit down and you'll work on things together in a workshop environment, or you're doing something together, you're being taught by someone, they're telling you what you could do, but you're actually doing it to say, hey, look, this is how I do this. Sanity Savers is just an example of Salesforce.com, who created a document called Sanity Savers. It's just a document that inside Salesforce that they can add information into, but it talks about classes that they can join, online resources, all really good stuff to help and enable you in a remote working environment. And sure, what we found now is that there's a lot more openly accessible resources out there, especially in the environment that we're in right now. And sometimes it can be quite noisy, but just find things that really interest you and really engage you. And then also feedback ideas that you come across, that you learn, things that you feel work really well, or that you've enjoyed using yourself in your own personal environment. I know there's a lot of people out there who've been using Zoom, for example, for connecting with your family all over the world. Or so share your ideas with your colleagues and with your company, because you never know, your company might embrace those. And as we come out of this pandemic and all the restrictions that we have, we may find that the way that we're working now may become more of the way that we're going to be working in the future. So why not trial different things now to see what works well and what works great? The third one I want to look at is being contactable and being transparent. And this is ensuring that as a team, you're working really well together. So update your email signature with a telephone number that you can be contacted on, or indeed forward, if you can do that remotely or have someone do this for you, forward your desk phone or your phone effectively to your mobile. I would say don't forward it to your home phone unless you're really good at making sure that you take the forward off after you finish working, because you want to make sure that you're not contacted outside of your working hours through your phone. And also, you know, my 2.5-year-old daughter will pick up the phone and will say hello. And, you know, I may never know that that person's called. I'm really fortunate that I have my own home office here, which is an office at the end of the garden, but she is in here with me sometimes. So it's highly likely that if the phone rang, she'd pick it up. Say hi and ask people how they are before jumping into work stuff. That's just, it just helps to show, like if you went to see them at their desk, you wouldn't just go straight into work stuff. If you hadn't had a chat with them already, you'd say, hey, how are you? How's everything going? And then you go into work stuff. So be mindful and think about that in terms of when you're working remotely. Use a task or project management platforms. Now we have another webinar session where we're going to be looking at a number of different tools. And we've also been commissioned to do training to help people with project management tools out there. You have like Asana, for example, you have Trello, and you have Basecamp. There are lots of different tools out there, and really you need to find the right tool that's going to be the right fit for what ultimately you need it to do. What is your core objective that you want this tool to do? But these are really great tools because they're task-led. So it's a great way of having transparency to seeing what people are working on, to seeing what tasks that you've got to be done, that you have to do by when, and also you can task people to do certain tasks, which means that you're reducing your email output as well and their email input, which is really good. So also they really help to manage workflow because there are a number of free versions and they have labels on them and tagging so you can prioritize them as well. And that leads me on to my next point, which is about prioritizing tasks. Now, on average, a knowledge worker is only productive for 3 hours a day. So that's really important about thinking realistically, how much time do you really have to do work? And we're going to cover that in a moment because I'm going to make you think about that. Remember, if you have any questions, please do pop them in the questions box and we'll pick those up at the end of the session. If I don't get to see your questions or answer your questions or see your comments, then I certainly will send you a response directly. Okay, so this is about effective time planning. I really need you to think here about how you're using your time. And so here are some ideas of what I have heard from clients in the past. I've got too much work to do and not enough time. And hopefully these will resonate with you. I'm worried I'm failing. I've always been asked to do things ASAP, ASAP. I don't know what to prioritize. When my director emails me, I action it straight away. And I feel overwhelmed. So those are actual real life responses that I've had from a survey that I did. And I'm sure that at least one of those resonates with you, even if it's not in a work life, it could be in a personal life too. So I really want you to think about this in terms of your effective time planning. So in a work situation, and you can apply this personally as well with different examples, but in a work situation, if you think that 25% of your time, so you've got 100% of your time, it doesn't matter if you work full-time, part-time, whatever that is, 25% of that working time is used up with holidays, or maybe you've got a doctor's appointment, or you could even be off sick. So 25% gone. Another 25% is on admin work, is on doing your performance objectives that you might need to do annually and your 6-month review. It might be team meetings. So 50% now gone. That means that, you know, this isn't an exact science. This is just a ballpark average. But on average, you'll have about 50% of your working time that you think that you have actually to do that everyday work that you need to do. And that can really fluctuate and change and also be dependent on the role that you have. So it's something that you really need to be thinking about when you're looking at what can you actually achieve? What are you capable of achieving in the time that you're allocated? Now, hosting and attending virtual meetings, with us all going into a much more of a virtual environment, we are doing even more. Yeah, I'm not really naked. We are doing even more virtual meetings. So here are some ideas for you to hopefully implement if you're not already. So use video where possible, because that means that you can see the people. I had one of my clients has said to me the other day, you know, sometimes when I speak to one of my colleagues, they go very quiet after I said something. And I feel like I need to fill that gap with something. But in actual fact, now I'm having more video calls with them, I realize that they're thinking, and I don't need to plug that gap, and I need to give them that time to come back with a considered answer. Have regular catch-up calls as well. So I talked about this earlier in terms of time boxing. So what you can do with your meetings is time box a meeting. So if you normally have an hour's meeting, why not change that to a 45-minute meeting, or even go for half an hour? If you've got a half an hour meeting, reduce it down to 20 minutes. Really, ideally, you only need to be doing effectively what you need to be doing in those meetings. So recording meetings as well, that is really a really good thing to do, best practice to do, because what that enables that if someone can't attend your recording, then they can actually, sorry, I'm just laughing at what just happened. Even though they can't make it, they can still go back and they can listen to a recording. And this is also really useful if you work with colleagues who don't have their first language, for example, as English, and they actually require you to have some different kind of, they require to listen to the recordings at a different length and go back and hear what you're talking about. Using interactive tools as well. There are a number of different tools that you can use dependent on the systems that you have. I'm going to run you through some screenshots in a minute about what you can do. It really depends on the system that you're using and what they have available, but I'll show you a couple of examples. Also alternate meetings for to accommodate different time zones. Now, what I tend to find is that colleagues in America will often be creating meetings at US times, and that's quite tricky for people who are in Asia Pacific, and there's always the need that the Asia Pacific people have to attend these calls quite late at night for them. So I'd say where possible, try and alternate these. I've run many meetings where I've had to do different types of accommodating different types of time zones. So what I have done in the past, if I've done like a stand-up in terms of when we've been looking at sprints, when we've been looking at agile marketing, what I've done is I've had 2 in a week. The first one would be done at a US time, which means that that's applicable for US, Europe, and well, US and Europe mainly, and those on this side. And then for the APAC colleagues, we would have that much earlier in the morning, and then that wouldn't be relevant for the American colleagues. But it did mean that we could touch base at least once a week with each other. Include an icebreaker at the beginning of call. That's sometimes quite a fun thing to do, especially if you've got a new group of people and you're looking to find out what they're like and introduce yourselves to them. There are lots of different examples that you can find online. And then if you really want to, and I wouldn't suggest this for some more serious calls, but you can update your background. So I've just got a little example here. You can see I haven't updated my background here. I do have a green screen, but there are ways that you can do that that's quite fun. And also another bit of element of fun, especially if you've got a team meeting, if you do conference call bingo, there are lots of different templates out there for this. And so what you do is you just simply circle them off when you're having a call. I mean, we've all been on the calls where they've gone, hello, can you hear me? You're on mute. Oh, the dog's barking. Oh, you know, whatever the distraction is, the child's crying at the door. So I talked about interactive tools earlier. This, for example, is Zoom. In Zoom meetings, you can use the interactive tools to draw things on the screen and put ticks in different places or little arrows, or you can add text. You can have it like as an interactive whiteboard, which is quite good fun. Then you can also save your drawings and what you've done. So that's really good as well if you're having like a brainstorming session and you're doing it virtually, and then you can save it. And then you can simply clear it if you want to. And everyone in the meeting can use those tools as well. And also in Zoom meetings, this is a Zoom webinar, so this is different, but in Zoom meetings, you can also use interactive tools like raising your hand. So I could ask you a question, for example, and I could say, raise your hand if you, and whatever my question is, or I could get you to answer yes or no. And then I'll see it all coming up. And that's also a nice way of continuing to engage people in a call. People can indicate if you want to go slower or faster, or there are some thumbs up, thumbs down, yay, celebration. I need a break, there's a cup and saucer, and then I've gone away. So maybe you just want to say to people, oh, I've left my desk. This is something else that I'd like to show you. This is from Teams. I have noticed that since I took this 2 weeks ago, Teams has updated some of the options. Instead of blur my background, it now says change my background. So they're really starting to think more like of what the other kind of services like Zoom are doing. But if you click on those 3 dots, what you'll find is there are lots of different options there for you. And some of them you can see here is that you can actually have it transcribing text. So turn on live captions. And as I'm speaking, it can have the text appearing. So that's really good if people want to, are reading it, or they're not quite understanding what someone's saying very well. And then here we've got an example of Megan, who works with me, and her gorgeous daughter. And so there's her and Megan, and they've got the background blurred, but because her daughter's on her shoulder, she's part of it, but if she moves away, she becomes blurred out. So that's also a good way of removing distractions. And also you need to be thinking about what is behind you when you're hosting a meeting. I watched something with one of the girls from nursery the other day, who was reading a story on Facebook, which was really lovely, but in the background I did notice that she had a bottle of gin. And as parents, we find that quite funny, and the children don't know any different. Well, they're too young. So dealing with interruptions, I wish that Poppy had done this now, but hey. So shut the doors. My door was shut. That's really important because that allows you some privacy. However, even if you shut doors, sometimes that doesn't always help. So we've got a picture here of Robert Kelly, and this was famous because he was doing an interview on BBC News Live, and his daughter came in the background, and then his baby proceeded to follow in the walker, and then his wife came in and kind of dragged them both out, and it was really funny. But you know what, Robert Kelly, he carried on. Organise when deliveries happen. So if you know that something's going to happen at a certain time, try and make those deliveries happen, or organise those deliveries around your schedule if you can. If you have a specifically really important call, try not to have your deliveries coming at that time. But those, like the postman, for example, or other deliveries where you can't set a time, that is quite tricky. But if you're having food being delivered at home. Mute when not speaking, that helps with keeping a clearer, more consistent line for everybody to enjoy the meeting. If you've got noise in the background, it reduces that. I would say if you're in a coffee shop, but those were the days. And then let people know if you're stepping away. If you're on video, they'll notice that you've walked off, and they may wonder where you are, and they'll find that a bit distracting. But just in the chat, or if it's more of an open flow, then let people know that you're stepping away. So the postman's just knocked at the door, just bear with me. It's happening to everyone. Everybody understands interruptions. Of course, some people are more sympathetic to some interruptions because, for example, if they have children, they understand how interrupting they are. But just let them know at the beginning, be really transparent, be really open, and just say, what, if my daughter comes over, she may talk to me, I may just respond back to her. So then she goes away, so it's absolutely fine. I was on a call last week, and cats were coming up and walking past the screen and then distracting everybody on the call. If you want to have a discussion in a meeting, and it could be a quite challenging discussion, something quite good that you could do is lay ground rules and have a capable chair. So for example, if you're going to be having a discussion about something that that could potentially be quite heated, or you want to encourage those people on the call who are normally quite quiet, then you can, as a chair, you can say, right, this is what we're going to talk about, and then I'm going to go to each person individually. Please don't talk over that person, allow that person to say everything they want to say, and then I'll move on to the next person, the next person, the next person. And you do a round just like that. And then as a chair, you need to give your feedback as well. And then you'll do another round just like that. So everybody gets the opportunity to respond to what's just been talked about. And then after you've done that second round, you open up the floor. And that enables everybody to have the opportunity to feedback. And even if people aren't confident to feedback or they need more time to process, they have the opportunity to say, you know what, I don't have anything to comment at this time. And that's fine. You know that you've given them the opportunity to have their moment and to talk through things. These are some of my distractions. I had chickens until the fox ate them. And I will be getting some again soon, but my distractions were chickens used to walk in the house, and actually the fox had attacked one of those chickens and she'd survived, and that's why they kept coming in, because you can see the little cage there. The cat, you know, jumps up behind me, or I generally have the office dogs with me, but I haven't because I didn't want them to be disruptions. The cat's all over your desk. Get up from the chair, the cat sits on your chair. You can see I've got a lot of animals here. I did have a time where I was working with a client and my snake had escaped. And in my old office, my snake was over here. And I was on a conference call and went through some boxes here and found her and put her back in. So yeah, that was definitely a distraction. I wasn't on video call, video, so that was good. This is my life as it is now. This is me trying to work. I work in the mornings with my daughter, and my husband works with my daughter in the afternoon. She has a tablet, or she's behind me, but you know, it's very distracting, but you've got to do what you've got to do, right? And you've got to work the best way that you can. And I'm going to talk to you about some tips that I've been given, some real life examples. So this is Poppy as well. She found my lipstick and I thought, oh, she's been lovely and quiet. Yeah, when they've been quiet, they're doing something. And then, you know, if I'm really lucky and my office is an absolute tip and I've got stuff all over the place, but for a moment I get a little bit of quiet because she's sleeping. And you can see that there's like 2 dogs in that shot as well. Dedicating a working space. Now, this is very dependent on where you live, what kind of place you live in, but it's very important that you dedicate a working space, and that you choose an area that you're going to be comfortable in, but not too comfortable, because you don't want to be sitting on the sofa, because that's always not necessarily good for your posture. So find a chair and a table, if you like, to sit at, but really consider your posture. Consider if you're slouching, try to sit up, set up little reminders just to remind yourself to sit up, and get up and walk away from your computer just to get some exercise and stretching. Shut the door for privacy. If you don't have one, buy a foldable screen, for example. Maybe also when you're considering about having a space, you could, if you're quite handy on DIY, you could get a fold-away table that you can secure on the wall. So as and when you need to, with a fold-away chair, when space is at a premium, so that you can work from that desk with that chair. A clear desk is a clear mind, so try and keep your space around you nice and clear if you can. That helps you to focus. A room with a view. Now, not everyone's lucky to have a room with a view. I have a view of my house. I have a view of hills and mountains. And I mean, the green is coming on the trees now, but just before that happens and all the leaves come out, I can see the estuary from where I sit. Over the top of some houses. So actually I'm very lucky with my view. I've got a nice hill there, and I've got cows that go across, and sheep and horses and stuff. But have something that inspires you, and even if you don't have a view, have a really nice picture in front of you. Have something that, you know, can allow you to be creative. Be able to shut down your computer and walk away. You've really got to think about and consider your work-life balance is immensely important. So finally, I want you to think about considering your colleagues, and this is about ensuring that you are thinking about your colleagues in terms of the cultural differences, the ways that they work, the time zones that they're working in, their personal style. So we touched on earlier about back style, which is visual, auditory, kinesthetic, where people could work and learn in different ways, and they may be really dominant in one way, or they may have a real mixed bag. We're all unique, right? We're all very special in our own ways. And so you need to think about the ways that they are different and unique to yourself as well. and also learn from mistakes, talk to each other. We learn quicker together when we're sharing information. An example I'll give to you is, for example, great way of putting that, Lou, institutions, academic institutions may want to discourage their academics from publishing negative results of when they do experiments, for example. But what that means is that they're not sharing those negative results so that others can learn with open data and say, oh, right, they did that and I can replicate that if I want to. So I won't keep making that same mistake. So you need to share and talk to each other from a professional environment and a personal environment. Hey, you know, this worked great for us, this didn't work great for us, and things will work great for you and not for others, and vice versa. You've got to find out what works best for you. So it's about working smarter and better together. And be agile. Now we do and specialize in agile training, specifically for marketers. But being agile is not about being able to bend over backwards necessarily and being physically agile. It's about, in your mind, it's about being flexible in how you approach things and in what you want to do. So just ensure that you are allowing yourself to be more flexible, because it also helps you in terms of your stress management as well. Because if you can't always account for something happening in terms of something may suddenly crop up and you're like, how am I going to deal with that? So if you have a more of an agile mindset, you're more flexible to say, okay, right, that's happened, it's fine. I'm going to do this to work around that, to change it. I want to give you just an example here, and because we do work with a lot of publishers and intermediaries and libraries, these examples that I give are either going to be marketing focused or they're going to be academic focused. But Leonardo Rolla, this is a nice example that we had from Nature. So he is a mathematician at the National Scientific and Technical Research Council in Buenos Aires. And he's also a maths professor at New York University, Shanghai in China. Now, he took 2 weeks to learn to teach online because he was in a situation where he was, had gone to Buenos Aires and then lockdown happened and he couldn't fly back to Shanghai in China, and he had to deal with a time zone where his students were 11 hours ahead of him. How is he going to teach them? And this is, you know, what's happened to a lot of those in education and training. How am I going to teach people now online? So he decided to use VoiceThread as an example. So basically what he does is, rather than have his long lectures, he records short videos, so that's more digestible content, where he explains the math concepts. And he has those short videos as a total of all of them of about 15 to 30 minutes. Makes you kind of wonder why they couldn't have their lectures for 15 to 30 minutes if they can do that with videos, right? But they do need to have the interactive time. So then students watch and then record themselves critiquing a classmate or showing themselves doing the concept. So then they're giving that information back to him while they're asleep. He has time to look and mark or digest or critique what they've sent. So his advice from his learning to date is that seek constant feedback through this process, learn from each other, learn together. I am the director of this movie, but we are all in this together. If you hadn't met the students, he would advise that you can schedule live sessions. So this, even though that this is an example of an academic teaching students who are in a completely different time zone as well as another country, this is also about thinking, how can I apply this if I do training, or if I'm a marketer and I train sales with products, for example. These are some great advice and feedback. It actually takes him, it's actually for him 3 times more work for him to do this, delivering online, than a traditional lecture. And so he says it takes him about 35 hours a week preparing online content. Now, if he's got to do his research work as well, you know, he's putting a lot of hours in a week. But actually, if you think about it, doing this online is a new concept for him. And having to learn and teach himself to do this, it's new. For me, I do this kind of stuff all the time. So my processes are really streamlined. I know how to make best use of my time. It doesn't take me very long to record a video, for example. I have a teleprompter when I do recordings of my the hints and tips video series that we have on YouTube. So I have learned how I can effectively streamline my processes to reduce the amount of time that I'm putting into things, which ultimately means that I am having a better return on investment. Some examples that I want to give you here in terms of marketing professionals who are giving some advice on having children as distractions at home. So there's Tom Pepper here, and he's the head of marketing solutions at LinkedIn. So he lives with his self-employed wife and their 2 and 5-year-old children. His wife records for BBC Radio 4's The Kitchen Cabinet. And so she needs a space. She needs to basically be able to go into a room and record her session without the interruptions. So how do they work together? Well, they put aside time each day to enjoy with the children so that they're getting that real quality time with each other. They do picnic lunches. They make a real thing of their lunches. He is basically a PE teacher for an hour a day, which is great because I tried this and it works really well. And even though my daughter is only 2.5, spending that time with her and ensuring she's getting that good level of exercise and we're running around the garden together ensures that she sleeps really well at night as well. Be upfront with your colleagues about the disruption so they know what's coming. And if it happens, just be like that example that I gave you, like Robert Kelly. So these were examples from a newsletter that I get called The Drum, which is really good, but these are predominantly UK-centric examples. Jacqueline is from Getty Images. So when the lockdown happened, she was actually stuck in Ireland with her mother and a 17-month-old. So she had to self-isolate because her daughter has started to show symptoms. So her advice is routine goes out the window. So, just don't be hard on yourself. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is don't be hard on yourself. And, if you're giving your daughter or your child or whoever more time on the tablet, it's fine. It's only temporary. Don't worry about it. Just go with the flow. You can always change things after. She said, learn to type quicker with your weaker hand because sometimes you're like holding a child. Just breathe and adapt, be agile, as I would say. And then exhaustion is there to embrace you like an old comfort blanket at the end of every day. I love that because actually that's true. Because you know what, you're gonna hit the pillow and go to sleep. Here are some other real life examples, and I've taken some pictures of some ones that I was sent when I asked on Facebook for people to give me some real life examples of what they're doing. So I had some people say things like, let them run free, it's fine. Or without help and depending how little they are, forget it. Or so those kind of things, I was like, oh man. But, everyone is going through this. Everyone's feeling the same. Just, don't worry about it. Just talk to each other and find out what other people are doing. And, just do it. Just bring it. Granny's reading hour, that was a really nice example that we had where obviously the children can't see Granny. So the children picked a book and then Granny does an hour of reading with the children virtually. I think that's really lovely. Someone said bribe them with surprises and chocolate. Word of advice, have a good store of stickers, chocolate and small treats before embarking on this. Homeschooling at its best. Everyone's going through all this stuff. Time box when you're working. So I had some nice examples here and I talked to you about that earlier. So some people are looking to work in shifts. So like 8 to 12, 2 to 4, 7 to 9. The way that I'm working at the moment is I have Poppy in the morning usually, and then my husband has her in the afternoon. And so what we do is we look to, I then will work when she's gone to bed, 7 till 11, because I'm trying to catch up with my morning's loss of work. So I will then use my evening time to catch up, which means I'm tired, but it's temporary. And yes, I do evening working sometime anyway, but it is what it is. And I'll get through this and so will everyone else. And I'm trying to do that also so that I'm less impactful on my weekends. I'm trying not to work on my weekends where possible, so I can have some quality time. Alternate working shifts as well. So someone had said you could do 1.5 to 2 hours each, and then have stopped to say this is when we're going to stop working by. Dedicating time every day to some kind of family activity. We heard an example earlier about having the picnic lunches, which is really nice, especially if you're fortunate to have good weather at the moment, which we are, which is, you know, quite amazing. Check out all of the free resources that are now available. There are lots of different services out there that are making resources that normally are gated and you have to pay for. They're making them free. So Woodland Trust in the UK, as an example, have a school pack, and I downloaded and printed off some worksheets the other day, and you can go out when you go for your walk. So in the UK here, we're on lockdown, and you can only go out for an hour's exercise a day, and you go for a walk, and only 2 of you at one time, unless you're from the same household, and you have to social distance, and you have to keep 2 meters apart. So anyway, I take Poppy out, we walk down the road, and we have the sheet, and it shows different types of leaves on it, or different types of flowers and things like that. So then we go and collect these leaves, and we come back and we look at them, and she can stick them on the paper if she wants to. But you know, those kind of resources, even though it's a school pack, so it's a bit too old for her, you kind of get the gist. There are some great packs out there, and I've had lots of great examples from people as well in terms of what you could do for children. Just ask through social media, and there'll be lots of blog posts out there as well. Story time recordings. So our nursery, for example, has done that with all the nursery stuff, which is really nice because Poppy gets to see them, and she gets to feel like she's doing story time at nursery because she really misses nursery. And also we can read it together, which we've done sometime at night. And then I also mentioned to you about Granny's reading hour. Have a movable office. So a friend sent me an example of them being in the garden. So, you know, don't have to necessarily work inside. You can go outside as well. Just make sure you're comfortable and you're looking after your posture, looking after your back. And also someone said, you know, having the children's TV on the background, they can actually self-moderate between the tablet and the TV and coming to see you and going outside and etc., etc. So it's only temporary. And there's a picture of Poppy having a snooze, which I did show you earlier, but just to, you know, she's always got the tablet on, and I wouldn't normally have her using it so much, but you know what? She plays on a creative app as well, and she does drawing and things, which means she doesn't always get covered in paint, which is good. Okay, so just in terms of like the last couple of examples that I want to give you, because we're going to be ending this webinar very shortly, but when we look at Hobie and Chris from AML Group, which is an agency, they have a makeshift desk in their dining room, and they leave the room to make calls. They go to a different room for a break and lunch, and they actually go and have lunch together. Just a note that they said is that wearing headphones can make you actually louder. Have a cutoff time of when you're going to finish, and having a structure in their day, it can really make their weekends feel like weekends. And for me at the moment, what I kind of struggle with is that it all just feels like every day is exactly the same, and I'm working on weekends as well, though I'm trying not to, even though what I said before. It's important where possible to have a structure, which is great if you're a couple or if you live at home alone, not so much if you've got children, or work, so do something new, work on a puzzle, start painting, learn a language. So do something, learn something new. People are talking about crocheting. I'm seeing like jigsaw puzzles, all over the place as well. So yeah, and make each other drink. So you're ensuring that your significant other or the person that you're living with, it could be housemates, you're keeping each other hydrated. So what if you work solo? Well, Juliet Cox, who lives in London, she says, you know what, I have a small apartment and I've got no garden and I live on my own. So hide your computer at the weekend, literally put it under your bed, hide it from view. Get outside every day for exercise, which is really important. And call your friends and stay connected. and basically laugh. And we talked about this, about having the video calls, about seeing each other as well. And then also in terms of how do I stay creative, and we can think about this as well as a dedicated working space. So Jim Hawker has given a nice example that he actually has a camper van or a motorhome, and so he's turned it into a makeshift office, and he has a shift, works in there on shift with his partner, so that the Wi-Fi actually stretches to it, and they alternate the childcare with the wife, but it gives them that dedicated space and place for that they can go and work. Just in terms of like company support, so if you're thinking about what is your company doing to support you, an example here is AQA, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But you know, your companies can do things like well-being sessions. I've seen this a number of times with some of my clients, where they'll have like an hour on a specific day of the week where they have these sessions, and they could be mindfulness or meditative or breathing, or maybe even they pay for a virtual yoga instructor or Pilates that everyone can join in and do. Another one I saw the other day was where they had a stress management coach that came in, and we've got a stress management webinar next week with Louise Adams. And that was really interesting because it was a 2-hour one. They actually had a workbook that you went through, but it was helping their colleagues to manage stress. Our one next week is about half an hour to an hour. You don't have to do a workbook, but Louise will give you some nice helpful hints and tips. And also you get access to the on-demand version, and it's super good value as well. So virtual hangouts, which we talked about, having a dedicated space where you just pop in and see each other. Just be careful that it doesn't get too overwhelming with the amount of virtual meetings that are happening. And Yammer groups as an example. So, you know, I love dogs, I love cats, I love people. So let's think about the AKQA example. They actually have over 2,000 staff all over the world. And what they did is they set up a radio station. And so they have 2 producers that work in 2 different time zones, and they take contributions and requests from staff, and they ensure that there's basically around the clock music and chat, and they'll have interviews as well. And that's a fun way of engaging with your workforce as well, and also finding out all the different fun music that people have out there, especially if there are bands that people have. So what I want to conclude with, and we are literally at time, is keep fit and healthy. That is above all the most important thing, and that isn't physically fit and healthy just, that's also thinking about your mind. Staying sane online. Be contactable and transparent with your colleagues or your family. Host and attend virtual meetings effectively. Deal with interruptions like I had to. Dedicate a working space. Accommodate different time zones. Time box your meetings where possible. Just reduce the amount of time that you're spending on this. In fact, I was listening to Deborah Meaden the other day, who's on a program called Dragon's Den. She's an investor. And she was saying actually what she's finding is that she is having more meetings, but they're time boxed, they're less time. And she's finding that more stuff is getting done because it's literally like boom, boom, boom. We go through these points. Okay, bish, bash, bosh, done. Keep meetings to a minimum. Don't have a meeting for the sake of a meeting to have a meeting. And learn from each other. Massively important.